Hello and welcome. Martin Warner, an Australian glider pilot, was awarded the Oswald Watt Gold Medal for establishing a new altitude record for a glider in 1950. He achieved this whilst unconscious from lack of oxygen. He didn't intentionally plan to fly that high. It all began at Narromine, about 300 kilometres west of Sydney. The weather had been hot the previous days, but on this Saturday, the 30th of December, a southwesterly change had been predicted. In the morning, Warner made a local flight in the Slingsby Gull 4 in hot northerly wind conditions. He took off again in the afternoon as the arrival of the change was heralded by a line of thick cumulonimbus clouds that appeared ahead of the front. Warner released from the Gypsy Moth aerotow and was lifted up into a dark cloud. Thunderstorms are to be avoided as violent vertical currents can overwhelm an aircraft's controls. Do you remember what happened to Iwa Wisniewska, a German paraglider? Training for the World Paragliding Championships in Australia in 2007, she was sucked into a powerful thunderstorm and carried unconscious and wearing a layer of ice to an altitude of more than 32,000 feet into the eye of the storm. This is higher than Mount Everest and colder at minus 50 degrees C. She said she didn't think she'd survive. The glider kept climbing, and I couldn't see anything. Then it got dark. I was already shaking, all wet. All the instruments were wet and frozen. She described the moment she realised she was in the middle of a storm, hearing thunder all around. I was praying, please throw me somewhere from this cloud. Her rate of ascent was clocked at 20 metres per second and her descent at 33 metres a second. She lost consciousness for about half an hour while her glider flew uncontrolled, but she woke up still in the storm. Slowly she navigated her way out of the storm and caught a glimmer of hope. She survived the ordeal with some frostbite to her face and some abrasions to her leg from the pelting hail. Dr. Ken Harrison, a retrieval specialist with the Australian Rescue Agency, said it is a medical miracle that her body was able to cope with the unconscious glide through the freezing storm. The same storm killed He Xiongping, a Chinese competitor who died from an apparent lack of oxygen and extreme cold. His body was found 47 miles from where he took off. Just as in these two incidents, Martin Warner's glider rose rapidly to 25,150 feet and Warner passed out through lack of oxygen. He recovered minutes later when the glider had spiraled out of control to a much lower altitude, exiting cloud at 4,000 feet. Warner found himself over scrub-covered hills south of Dubbo and had to crash land the glider into the treetops on the hillside. He managed to extricate himself from the wreckage and walk for about half an hour to seek help. If this was all that you did with your life, I guess you would be happy, but there is so much more to this man. He was an aircraft engineer and was designer of the de Havilland Drover, the first all-metal transport plane built in Australia. The aircraft had some similarities with the two-engine British-built de Havilland Dove, but used a tri-motor configuration. Design work on the DHA-3 began in 1946 after de Havilland identified a need to replace the de Havilland Dragon biplane, then in widespread use in Australia. Using the Dove as a starting point, de Havilland designed an aircraft with three 4-cylinder Gypsy Major engines instead of the Dove's two Gypsy Queen 6-cylinder engines and a fixed tailwheel undercarriage instead of the Dove's retractable tricycle undercarriage. After entering service by 1952, the type's shortcomings were becoming apparent. These included the aircraft's lack of power, especially in hot weather, and an unfortunate tendency for propellers to fall off in flight, resulting in the loss of 2 aircraft. Thank you for watching. Comments always welcome. Like and subscribe to promote content.